Let's look at what we have so far. We know that the hero is defined by persistence, but he's recognized the moment he steps into uncharted territory. Stepping into uncharted territory is going to make your application more inspiring. Don't worry, we'll talk about specifically how to do that later on. We also learned that the adult hero is defined by the moment that he rejects and repudiates a view of the guide. And we realize that the adult hero is the most inspiring of all archetypes. If your application embodies the adult hero, you're going to have a much higher chance of getting in. Now, in the last video, I told you that these archetypes aren't just used for college strategy. This actually goes way beyond that. So in this video, I'm going to show you some famous examples of reversals that are used in a variety of areas so that you can see how powerful these tools are. These tools are not just for college strategy, these tools are for everything. And because they're so powerful, they happen to work for college strategy. These aren't college strategy tools, these are just tools. These are the most powerful tools, the most powerful rhetorical tools in the world. So let's take a look at some examples of reversals. And I want to give you just a variety of examples. And some I'm going to read and some I'll just refer to. Here's a famous example from Seinfeld, the great comedian Seinfeld. He talks about, and you should definitely try to look up some of these videos and see them done. The thing that you need to look for when you're looking at these videos, by the way, is look at how you respond and look at how the audience responds. That's the response you want from your application. That kind of respect and joy, that laughter that comes forth where you're just like, yeah, he's right about that if it's a comedian, or that raw inspiration you feel if it's maybe more of an action movie or something like that. But I'm going to start out with one of the most famous poems in the English language. This is T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland. Here's how it opens. April is the cruelest month, breeding lilacs out of the dead land, mixing memory and desire, stirring dull roots with spring rain. Winter kept us warm, covering earth in forgetful snow, feeding a little life with dry tubers. Now notice here there's a lot of reversals happening. The very opening line, April's the cruelest month, is a powerful reversal because it's the opposite of what we think is true. April isn't the cruelest month. April is nice. It's spring. February is the cruelest month. That's how we view it. But what does he say? He says that winter kept us warm. In other words, in this poem, he's saying that in the winter, we could stay numb and not have to face any of these difficult thoughts or traumas or whatever. In the spring, they come bubbling to the surface. We have to face them. So that's like much more cruel. It is nicer to be able to be numb than to have to face things. Now, you notice over here that he says things that are actively false. Like winter is not warm. But the mere act of going against the established view is inherently inspiring. That's the adult hero. The very first people that I know of in history that did reversals were called the Sophists. The Sophists would literally find something that they knew was 100% false, and they would try to prove it true. They didn't try to figure out how to prove it true before they made the statement. They first made the indefensibly false statement and then figured out how to prove it true. And in that process of figuring it out, they had to be clever. One of the most famous sophist proofs was proving that black is white. Again, we know that's not true, but if you have to try to find a way to prove it true, you're going to have to be clever. And that's the same thing will be true in your college applications. If you make a statement that is false, actively false, and figure out a way to justify it, it's going to be so much more exciting than if you just state the obvious in a way that's boring and safe and humdrum. Remember, we talk about the inspiringness of stepping into uncharted territory. This is part of that. If you just state the safe, the obvious, what everyone already agrees with, that's the most uninspiring thing you can possibly do. That doesn't show intelligence, that just shows fear. By going against the established view, you're going to show creativity, intelligence, the heroic step into the uncharted, and most importantly, the adult hero's rejection of the guide. I should say what a guide is, by the way. A guide can be a physical person, but it can also just be a commonly held view. It can be a dictionary definition. Any of those things can be the guide. It doesn't have to be a person. It just has to be something that has kind of guidingness. The dictionary has guidingness because we treat it as a guide of what words mean. You know, great historical figures have guiding this if their words are inspiring. Now notice that whatever you start out as having as the guide has to be something that you do agree with. It has to be something inspiring, and rejecting and repudiating it has to be difficult. In the hero myth, the hardest thing for the hero to do is to go against the guide. The guide is his mentor. To reject and repudiate one of his views is so psychologically difficult. It's not hard for the hero to kill the villain. That's what the hero was born to do. It's hard for him to reject and repudiate the guide. And because it's so difficult, it becomes more powerful. Remember, your reversals don't have to be true. They just have to go against the established view. Let's take a look. I'm just going to describe some of these. Let's take a look at a famous scene from the most famous graphic novel of all time, Watchmen. Watchmen made it to Time Magazine's list of 100 best novels of the 20th century. It has been made into more than one, into a movie, into an HBO series, and into a video game. And in the most inspiring quote, here's what's happened. One of the characters, Rorschach, has been locked in prison with a bunch of people that he put in prison. Rorschach is a sort of superhero vigilante, and it'd be kind of like if Batman was put in jail. All the people in jail that he's put in jail are there, and he's outnumbered like 1,000 to 1. And here's what Rorschach famously says. He says, "None of you understand. I'm not locked in here with you. You're locked in here with me." In other words, he says to them that they're the ones in trouble, because it's not that he can't escape, they can't escape. It's the most inspiring and electrifying moment in the graphic novel as well as in the movie. And again, that's a reversal. It's taking the expected view and turning it around. One of Jerry Seinfeld's most famous stand-up comedy scenes is where he talks about somebody gives him the finger. And he talks about how silly and arbitrary it is that if somebody shows you their finger, you're supposed to be upset by it. He then says he'd be much more upset if he got the toe. Because if you get the toe, somebody has to take off their shoes and socks and stick a toe out the window. And when you watch the audience respond to it, it's so exactly what you want to have as a response to your own application. Now, you're going to see these reversals everywhere. You're going to see them in stand-up comedy. You're going to see them in song lyrics. You're going to see them with philosophers. I want to show you an example from a philosopher and cult leader, Osho. The starting point is the common view, love is blind. Here's what this incredibly inspiring and effective cult leader, whether you think he's, a good person or a bad person, that's up to you, but he's an effective person. I think no one's going to disagree with that. That his rhetoric was effective, I think everyone in the world can agree with. And here's what he says. People say love is blind because they do not know what love is. I say unto you, only love has eyes. Other than love, everything is blind. Now notice he doesn't kind of get wishy-washy and say, well, sometimes blind, No, he goes directly against it. He says, only love has eyes, everything else is blind. He directly rejects and repudiates the guide. And Osho does this a lot, as do most cult leaders, as do most positive religious figures, as do most great politicians, as do most terribly evil politicians. People with this kind of influence always use a lot of reversals, and here's why. A reversal establishes the adult hero archetype. We all have that archetype within ourselves, and we're all proud of it. We're all drawn to it. If somebody else reminds us of it, it reminds us of something that we like about ourselves, and that's what makes it so powerful. Now, let's take a look at, we're going to now look at an example from a famous song lyric. Now, if you listen to a lot of music with lyrics, so anything other than classical music, you're going to hear a lot of reversals. Now, here's the starting point. The starting point is, I wish I knew then what I know now. It's a common cliche. And what that means is, when I was younger and foolish, I wish I knew then, I had the experience then, the wisdom then that I have now, so I didn't make those stupid mistakes. But would a great classic rock musician like Bob Seger just go ahead with the original? No, of course not. Let's see what he says. He says in one of his most famous song lyrics, I wish I didn't know now what I didn't know then. In other words, he wishes that today he still had that reckless naivete that he had in his youth, that he didn't have the caution that has come from experience. He goes directly against the original position. Now, this technique is called reversals. It's one of the most important techniques that we use in college strategy. Let's talk about how you can use that technique. You can use it just in the opening line of your common application statement. You can say, this famous person said this, and here's why he's wrong. You can use it throughout your application. But one of the most important methods of using reversal, we're actually going to talk about in the next video. We're going to talk about one of the most bewildering essays that exist and how you can use the technique of reversal, which establishes the adult hero, to create something unforgettable, to make sure that your essays stand out so that you get in.